Welcome to our talk, where today we are going to talk about how Lazarus Group were targeting specific individuals and how attackers were exploiting a zero-day vulnerability to gain read-write primitives to effectively blind security vendors and security features. My name is Lužino Kamastra, and I'm a senior malware researcher at Gen Digital, focusing on analyzing and hunting APTs and various complex attacks. And on this research were with me Jan Wojcieszek, who is also a senior malware researcher.
Hello everyone, my name is Igor Morgenstern and I'm a senior malware researcher for Gen Digital.
Thank you. So we first start with a quick introduction about previous research regarding to Lazarus Group, how we're targeting specific individuals, followed by attack chain analysis. We're going to describe each stage of the attack chain, and my colleague will tell you more about zero-day vulnerability and also how with the Rootkit Capabilities they were blinding security solutions and security features. As you already heard about this Lazarus Group, they were targeting specific individuals via fabricated job offer. As you can see on the slides here, there are already various research about this topic, and all day they have the same common infection vector, and that is through a fabricated job offer. Where in our case was the same, where the attacker initiated attack again by presenting a fabricated job offer, where they used various communication platforms like LinkedIn, WhatsApp, or emails. But the victim has to first to show some skill. So what is the best way to show your skills? And that is through a challenge. So this challenge was sent by the attacker to the victim, and it was forced a victim to mount this ISO file and execute Amazon VNC, which executes the malicious DLL, and this malicious DLL is going to execute the payload, and this payload is going to communicate with a hacked website, which was utilized by the Lazarus Group as a CNC server to download and execute a shell code in the memory. Unfortunately, we couldn't obtain this shell code, but thanks to a really good telemetry, alongside this shell code executed in the memory, we found two files. One Rolfing loader, another one is NLS file. The main idea of this shell code is actually to achieve the persistence by registering a Rolfing loader as a service. And then the Rolfing loader is actually kickstart of the whole execution chain, which needs to first, which his main idea is actually load and execute the next stage, which is a Rolfing. But in order to get there, he needs to first obtain a XOR key by calling get system firmware table. And after this call, you get the 30-byte long key, which helps you to XOR the NLS file. This NLS file is basically encrypted Rolfing. And after decryption, the Rolfing is now has everything and can load Rolfing in the memory. But before going to the analysis of the Rolfing, I would like to also show you that this sample was already discussed by the Microsoft research, where they shared a research where the multiple Korean threat actors was exploiting vulnerability in the TeamCity. And as you can see on the slides here, in the left there is a Microsoft sample, and on the right there is our sample that we found in the victim machine. And as you can see, there is a pretty strong code overlap between those two samples. So let's go back to the analysis of the Rolfing. So first of all, the Rolfing is another loader. So his idea is load and execute the next stage. This Rolfing, first of all, needs to locate the binary blob. This binary blob holds another stage, which is a rollmeet, and also two encrypted modules one module is the network module, another one is a part of the RAD module, which I will talk later, and also the encrypted configuration data. And this binary blob is also very important to say that it was located without any file extension. So Rosling has to locate this binary, and what's the way how the Rosling was locating this binary blob is that it was enumerating the folder, and it was looking for a file which has the first 4 bytes. These 4 bytes was indicating the size of how much data should be read from the binary blob and extract into memory, and then it was starting to search for a start action in this data. So as you can see, after all these conditions are met, so the Rosling found a start action in the export function. It is now pretty confident to load the rollmit in the memory. As you can see on the slides here, another loader. Again, a rollmit does, in order to load and execute another stage, it needs to communicate not with 1 or 2, but 3 different CNC servers. And in order to communicate with all of them 3, it uses different export function from the network module binary, which the rollmit will extract from the binary blob. So after this is done, and I forget, of course, it needs to also parse the address of the CNC server from the binary blob in order to communicate first with the first CNC server. So after the communication with the first CNC server, it will retrieve the HTML file. From the HTML file, it will extract the address of the second CNC server, and from the second CNC server, we will retrieve the PNG file, where thanks to the steganography, it will extract the address of the third CNC server. And the last communication is with the third CNC server. Well, the third CNC server will retrieve the data blob. Again, this data blob contains configuration data for the next stage, but also contains the data to be able to create a Kylin RAD. So the rollmit needs to extract part of the Kylin RAD from the binary blob, and part of the Kylin RAD will receive from the data will be in the data blob. So after this, it will append it together, and it will create a Kylin RAD, which will be loaded and executed in the memory. And this Kylin RAD, in order to communicate with the CNC server, it needs to again load a network module, because thanks to the network module, it has API functions in order to communicate with the CNC server, where communication with the CNC server is encrypted with the IS algorithm. And this is a custom RAD, so it was developed by the Lazarus group, with the file compression capabilities, ability to upload file to a CNC server, change files, last write timestamp, but most important functionality of this RAD is able to download the DLL file from the CNC server and loading in the memory, which means that in this case, we are high confident that it was loading the exploit to gain read-write primitives, and also thanks to the exploit, it will also load the FAD module, where it was binding security vendors and security features. And now my colleague will tell you more about the exploit.
Okay, so before we dig into the internals of FAD module, let's quickly recap why threat actors are even interested in getting kernel level access, and why in many cases to achieve that they use vulnerable drivers. So from an attacker's perspective, crossing from admin to kernel opens the whole new world of opportunities. It becomes possible to disrupt security software and hide indicators of infection, such as files, processes, and network activity. It also becomes possible to disable kernel mode telemetry and turn off different mitigations. So even though Microsoft do not consider admin to kernel a security boundary, they have made a significant progress over the years in hardening this boundary. With the introduction of mitigations such as driver signature enforcement and the HVCI, it became very difficult to run your own custom code in kernel. So attackers are being forced to use data-only attacks. So how can we solve this? One of the ways would be actually sign your own malicious driver, and we definitely see this kind of drivers in the wild, but these kind of drivers can be detected during the verification process of the when signing the driver. So another way would be to actually abuse the vulnerable drivers, and this is the technique we are going to discuss today. We can roughly divide this technique into 3 categories. So the first one would be, and they bring your own vulnerable driver. So this one is the easiest one to pull off because there are plenty of well-known vulnerable drivers available for everyone to exploit. And we have seen Lazarus exploiting these kind of drivers in previous campaigns, more specifically drivers like dbutil and ENE. But on the other hand, this is the most straightforward to detect because to load the driver, you have to first drop it on disk, and Microsoft and other security vendors usually have their own blacklists of well-known vulnerable drivers. Another technique would be zero-day bring your own vulnerable driver, and this is much stealthier than the previous one, but it requires an attacker first to discover the zero-day vulnerability in one of the already signed drivers. But from the researchers, we can see it is not such a difficult task to accomplish. It can also be detected in theory because loading some third-party drivers can generate suspicious events in EDRs or etc. The best option would definitely be a zero-day in the OS itself when you can abuse one of the built-in Windows drivers. This one is the most difficult one to achieve because finding zero-day vulnerability in one of the Windows components is much more difficult. The attack surface is much reduced comparing to the previous technique, and the code quality is higher comparing to the third-party vendors. But this technique provides the best level of stealth, and this is the technique that Lazarus used in this campaign. So when analyzing malware from one of our victims, our colleague Jan Wojciech discovered that one of the samples was exploiting a zero-day vulnerability in one of the Windows components. We have successfully submitted this vulnerability to Microsoft and received this CV for the vulnerability. More specifically, the vulnerability resides in ioctl dispatcher of AppID driver, which is a part of AppLocker feature of Windows. So to exploit this vulnerability, an attacker has to send specifically crafted ioctl to this driver, and by doing so, it is going to get ability to run arbitrary kernel functions. An attacker also has partial control over the first argument of this function. There are some limitations also. For instance, map prevents you from calling a user mode code, and KCFG requires a valid target, so an attacker has to work a bit harder. The ioctl itself is exposed through this specific device, and to send ioctls, a user has to have write access to this device, and to have write access, it should be running as a local service. Let's see how they actually exploited this vulnerability. Before they start, they make sure that the driver is loaded. They do it by writing a specific event to an AppLocker ETW provider. Then they wait some time for allowing the driver to actually load. After that, they impersonate the local service account to gain the right access to this device. And the next stage would be actually to exploit this vulnerability to gain write primitive. And using this write primitive, they are going to change the previous mode of the current thread. So by doing so, they effectively make it appear that the calls are coming from kernel mode, and they are able to read and write arbitrary kernel memory using anti-write virtual memory function. Microsoft addressed this vulnerability by introduction of exGetPreviousMode check in the ioctl dispatcher. So FAT module, it is data-only rootkit. It is operating entirely from user space. The first version of FAT module was independently discovered by Ahnlab and ESET researchers and published in 2022. So the first version was using bring your own vulnerable driver exploit and was implementing 7 different data-only rootkit techniques. The new version is armed with zero-day exploit and is implementing 9 different kernel object manipulation techniques. So these are the techniques we are going to discuss now. So the first technique is targeting registry callbacks. So these callbacks allow drivers to monitor and respond to changes in the registry and can be registered using a CM register callback function. So manipulation technique starts by resolving CM unregistered callback function, which is an export of NTOS kernel module. Then it's going to scan the function for this specific instruction, which is loading an address of callback list head, which is pointing to a linked list of CMReg callback structs. By going over this linked list, it is going to check where the callback function resides and skip all the whitelisted modules. All of the rest of the functions are going to be replaced with OB is kernel handle and unlinked from the list entirely. The second technique is targeting object callbacks, and this technique has not changed since the previous version, but let's see how it works. The object callbacks are meant for monitoring and responding to thread, process, and desktop handle operations. These callbacks can be registered using OB register callbacks function, and the technique starts by resolving of the OB get object type function, which is an export of NT-OS kernel module. Then it is going to look for OB type index table inside this function, and it is pointing to an array of pointers to object type structures. So each such struct represents a different system object type. And by going over the callback list, it is possible, or FAT module can neutralize the callbacks by pointing their forward and backward pointers to itself. Another technique is dealing with process thread and image callbacks. These callbacks are pretty important. They allow drivers to run the custom code in response to processes and threads being created and images being loaded, such as DLLs loaded by processes. So these callbacks can be registered using the following functions, and these callbacks are often used by EDRs. So the technique starts by resolving all of the necessary structures, and initially it is clearing out the PSP notify enable mask. This is already going to disable the callbacks, but it doesn't stop there. It is going to create a new array that is going to contain only callbacks from the whitelisted modules. So eventually it is going to replace the original array with the array that contains only the whitelisted callbacks. In the end, it is going to revert the value of PSP notify enable mask. So file system mini filters is a mechanism for drivers to intercept file system operations. It can be used in a variety of different scenarios, including compression, encryption, and antivirus scanning. So in the early version of FAD module, it was patching the filter function directly, which is not possible anymore with the presence of HVCI, so they had to re-implement this technique from scratch. So they start by resolving FLT global structure, which is pointing to frame lists. It is a linked list of FLTP frame structs. Each such struct represents a single filter manager frame. So by following attached volumes list, we get to the list of FLT volumes. Each such struct is a representation of all the instances which are attached to a single volume. So by following callbacks operations list, we get to an array which is indexed by IRP major function codes, and following that, we get to another list of callback nodes from which we can retrieve an instance, and from this instance we get to the filter structure itself. So FAD module starts by checking the name of the filter, and if the name belongs to Hitman Pro, it is going to unlink this node immediately. Otherwise, it is going to check if this name is on whitelist. If it's not, it's going to make the decision whether to remove it or not based on the default altitude of this filter. So FAD module is interested in two ranges of altitudes. The first range is FS filter activity monitor, and the second one is FS filter antivirus range. If for all of the mini filters which are in these ranges, it is going to remove them from the linked list and wipe the callbacks nodes entirely from FLT instance structure. So next technique is working against Windows filtering platform. So Windows filtering platform is a set of APIs which are designed for host-based network traffic filtering. So it allows packet filtering, modification, and the dropping of packets. And this specific technique is executing only when the Kaspersky drivers present on the system. So they start by resolving GWFP global struct. This struct is not documented, but it is not difficult to find an offset inside this struct, which is pointing to an array of callouts. So by going over these callouts, FAD module can set callout flag conditional on flow flag inside the callout object structures. And according to the documentation, if this flag is set, the callout function is only going to be executed if there is a context associated with the data flow. So some security vendors definitely set this flag by default, so these callouts are not going to be affected by this technique. So considering this and the initial check for Kaspersky drivers, we assume that this technique is specifically targeting Kaspersky. Event tracing for Windows, or ETW, is a high-performance mechanism for tracing and login events. So it is basically meant to connect between log providers and log consumers, and Microsoft provides a few useful default providers. For instance, Microsoft Windows Threat Intelligence providers, which provides logs for suspicious events, such as processes writing into other processes' memory. So this specific technique is targeting Windows system loggers, and it is fairly simple. It is basically just zeroing out ETWP active system loggers and eventually disabling the loggers. Next technique is also targeting ETW, but it has a hard-coded list of 95 different GUIDs for specific providers. So it starts by resolving ETWP host silo state, which is pointing to a structure which which contains hash table of GUIDs. So following this hash table, we can discover ETW GUID entry struct, which contains the actual GUID. So by going over this hash table, we can find all of the GUIDs which are on our list and disable them by actually by zeroing out provider enable info is enabled field of this structure. It is also possible to for these providers to actually supply the logs in different ways. So FAT module is going to zero out all of the following masks to prevent it from happening. So here we have a quick demo. This is going to show the last technique that I have discussed. So we start by monitoring for the events from services log provider. We can start the service and see the logs are coming. So now we are going to actually run the exploit, which is going to disable the GUID, which corresponds to the services. Yeah, and now you can see that we don't get any new logs. Okay.
Thanks. Another FAT module technique to disrupting is image verification callbacks. Image verification callback is actually invoked every time a new driver image is loaded in the kernel memory. And it's a pretty useful functionality for anti-malware software to block malicious or vulnerable drivers. And to disrupt this, FAT module needs to first allocate a function called as a register image verification callback in the kernel, and then looking for a pointer which points to the global object, and this global object has the element register callbacks, which points to the linked list of callback registrations where callback functions resides. And to disrupt this, FAT module clears the entire list by making the register callbacks head list entry point directly to itself. Now let's talk about direct attacks on the security software, where in this case it was targeting Ahnlab security solution, where it first needs to locate the A process structure of the Ahnlab, and then to disrupt this process is basically zeroing out the protection element, and by this modification you are making it just a regular non-protected process, which means it can open up some further attacks from the user mode, and it may disrupt links between user mode and the kernel mode components. But before the FAT module is going to disrupt another security solutions, in order to increase stability of this attack, it needs to first do some small changes in his own e-process structure. And it's basically zeroing out a mitigation flag in the e-process structure, and also it clears the flag in the handle table, which is enable handle exception. And now, I will explain to you how FAT module was directly targeting other security solutions. I would like to explain to you what is actually first handle table is used for. So when the new user mode codes interacts with the kernel object, such as process, files, or mutexes, the problem is that it typically doesn't work directly with the object itself, but instead it references them indirectly through the handlers. So internally, the kernel must be able to translate the handle to the corresponding kernel object. And this is actually where the handle table comes in. As you can see on the slides, there is a pointer to the handle table entries. So the handle is actually indexed in those entries. So, and this is per process table available in the iProcess structure. Now, let's talk about the last, finally the last FAT module disruption technique to disrupt a security solution. And by doing this, the FAT module creates first a dummy thread with all access rights. So as you can see on the slides, by creating a thread, which by itself is not interesting, by creating this, you are creating an entry in the handle table entries. So after this, you are basically you have a pointer which points to the handle table entry, and object pointer bits points to the corresponding arbitrary object. And with the read-write primitives, FAT module is able to modify object pointer bits. Well, it will point to targeted processes, where targeted processes are Windows Defender, Crowdstrike, or Hitman Pro. So by doing this, the FAT module now can perform privilege operation on it, which means that FAT module can now call any API functions to be able to suspend this targeted process and all threads that are regarding this process. And this is how FAT module was disrupting the security solutions. So in conclusion, our research has shown that the Lazarus Group is still investing significant resources into developing sophisticated attacks, including discovery and weaponization of the zero-day vulnerabilities to target high-value assets. And despite existence of various mitigations, our findings indicate the kernel-based security indicates it is still kernel-based security solutions still remain vulnerable, and despite those sophisticated attacks, Lazarus Group is still using infection vector, still using phishing as infection vector to gain to the victim machine. So that's was all from us. Thank you for your attention, and we are ready to answer some questions. Yes?
Do you know what they were trying to generally achieve with this? What's their end goal?
So by the facts, because I'm the researcher, so I'm really, by the facts, we don't have the facts, what we are trying to achieve. But what I can say, what I think, is their motivation, I think, was to get to the attacker, to the corporate network. Because I think they were trying to do is kind of bypass this first infection vector, not just by infect the whole network, but infect individual. And that individual may use corporate laptop as for private stuff. And I think that's why they used also such a sophisticated attack to kind of disrupt these security solutions, because I don't have in my private laptop Crowdstrike. So I think that's, that can be one of the way. And to achieve why target specific company, I think they were going after money. I think there was financial motivation, since I think the Lazarus Group is a pretty famous for this motivation. Another? Yes, yes, please. Yeah. You're, yeah, behind. Sorry, I didn't hear you.
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. First of all, thank you for the interesting presentation. My question is that before this malware, before this FOD module, had you seen Lazarus using this sort of sophisticated kernel mode malwares?
Again?
Any other kernel mode malwares you analyzed from Lazarus group?
So far, I'm aware of the FOD module, but I'm not holding the whole history of the Lazarus group attacks in my mind. I mean, my head, on top of my head. But I know about this FOD module, and the previous module by the FOD module also discovered by others AV vendor. But this FOD module was newer version, so they were through data-only attack. They were the way how they by binding security vendors and security solutions.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Hi, thanks for the presentation. Yeah, I was just curious because the 10 techniques or 9. Did you uncover them yourself, or it was a bigger community that worked on this? And which one did you enjoy reversing the most?
It was discovery by myself, also by my colleague Jan Wojciech. But that's also I have to say that the first discovery was the exploit. And since we have a pretty good telemetry in the memory, alongside this shellcode, we had them dump, which alongside this exploit was a rootkit as well. And what was I think most interesting is how with the data-only attack, how it was crafting the handle table. So it was pretty interesting because on the first side you don't understand, but when you're going to deeper and understand more about Windows internals, that it makes sense. Yes. Okay, good. Thank you so much again.